Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all my blessed beloveds out there in video land. You're watching Living and Thriving with Rusty, and I'm Rusty. And the humidity is struck again. Bum, bum, bum. Welcome to Florida. So we only have a couple of months of humidity. It's okay. Lots of air conditioning everywhere you go, unless you want to go into an auto mechanic shop. And, well, quite frankly, wait until December. Nonetheless, I don't have to deal with snow, socks, boots, coats, mittens, icicles hanging from my nose or my eyebrows. I really quite enjoy being in shorts and a t-shirt and looking like a lazy bum all the time. Doesn't bother me one bit. I wore suits long enough in my life. Don't need them anymore. So you are very, very excited about our next guest. Good morning, Miss Jenny. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I'm living like a rock star.
Awesome.
No, I'm not. I'm old.
As am I, although I'd rather not admit that.
You know, I just come to the place in my life where I realize that I might have to do an extra heave-ho to get out of bed, and maybe when I sneeze, I have other issues. But the good news is I've retired at 45, and I get to spend the rest of my life with what's left of my body doing what I want to do. And that's really cool, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jenny, who are you? What do you do? And I love the fact that you are probably one of the only guests I've had, over 1,000 guests in the last 2 years. And none of them have their books available for everybody to see the visuals. So good on you, A+ students.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was kind of fun to get that poster set up. I realized the small one was a little hard to see, so there we go.
No, I love it. So let's dish. Talk to me, baby.
Okay.
All right. What do you do, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so I live in Seattle, and I have 2 kids. They're now 14 and 16. And I'm doing what I'm doing because my husband, Dennis, died 5 years ago.
Oh, wow. Goosebumps.
Yeah, of brain cancer. Crazy. I had never heard of the word glioblastoma before. It was just the primary care doctor said, there's something really wrong with your brain. I don't want to scare you. You might have glioblastoma. You need to go see the neurosurgeon tomorrow. And I'm like, glioblastoma, what is that, right? Of course, you hit Google and all this. Now, of course, we've heard about it because Beau Biden died of it. John McCain died of it. It's been a little bit more talked about. And now I'm hearing all these people who, of course, I'm in this world, so I run into people. Anyway, point being, he was sick for 8 months. Terribly difficult time, ending on hospice at home. Died in January 2016. And all along, during that 8 months, I kind of instantly became a single parent, even though he was alive. The brain cancer was really affecting him cognitively. And so I was immediately in charge of everything. Both kids who were 9 and 11, him, me, the dog, the cat, the house, everything. I was the single parent. And I just felt lost, right? How do I do this? How do I parent? How does this not totally destroy my kids and their lives and their futures, right? It's obviously going to affect them. It's going to be a part of their story forever. But how does it not completely destroy them? What do I do, right? How do I do this? So while he was sick and then after he died, I just felt lost. And of course, I went to Amazon, typed in, okay, how do I be a widowed parent? Can't find any books. Fast forward, and long story short, I decided that I could create a podcast and go out and interview people and experts who could shed light on some piece or another of this question, who had information, who had resources, also widowed parents who could share their journeys, because I tell you, people feel really alone, right? If you don't know anybody in your social circle, in your neighborhood, in your kid's school, who is a widowed parent, and a lot of people don't have anybody in their personal circles who's also a widowed parent, they feel super alone. It turns out there's a lot of us, but maybe we're a little hidden or something. Anyway, I started this podcast and I started interviewing people, and I realized I could bring these stories and these resources to people like me, and I could learn as I went along and share out what I was learning, because it's not practical for every widowed parent out there to go and interview all these people, right? So I started doing that, and that was 2.5 years ago now, and then ended up deciding to write this book. It's called Future Widow, and it's set in that time period when my husband was sick, but I realized that I could weave in what I was learning through the experts I was interviewing about children's grief, and about adult grief too, and my own story, and share that out as another resource to people who are looking for some information and help on this journey.
I love it. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on this show, because there is so much to this topic. It is beyond 25 minutes that we're allotted, right?
Yeah, we could talk about this all day, I think.
Right. It's tough because you have to relearn who you are as an individual. You have to relearn who you are as a person who just lost their bestie in a lot of ways, you know? And you have to relearn how to deal with these two little people and their own process, on top of your own process, on top of your family's questioning how you're processing, you know, and then the societal stuff that comes with it. And I love the fact that you pursued this in a way that is actually inspiring to other people to get through their process. I have a couple of friends who are my age and their partners are dying of cancer. I've witnessed this several times, and cancer is nasty.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end, because you don't even know who that person is anymore, and it's just taken over. And that's also a part of the layer that I don't think people talk enough about, is the detachment before the physical letting go.
Are you thinking about like anticipatory grief?
Yeah.
Another word I'd never heard before I, got involved in all this. But yeah, that idea that you do start, in a lot of cases, grieving before you know how the story is going to end. You know it's going to end badly. And so you start, processing in those times when you can go walking, in those times when you have your girlfriends over and you can sit and talk. You start processing some of that stuff ahead of time. Doesn't make it easier, it just makes it different.
Well, and I think in our age range and in the way society is now, we used to have a comfortable relationship with death. We used to celebrate it and expect it and understand it, and it was a positive. And then towards the 1800s, it became more of this depressing sadness, and the narrative changed as to how we perceive the process. And I think it's even harder when you're a young mom with young kids in a society that perceives death in almost a negative way, for you to process that information. So for those people who are watching, going through a similar situation, do you have like top 3 things that you would recommend to try to keep it together as best as you can?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thinking, I'm not sure if you mean specifically about in relation to the kids, but one of the things that I've learned that wasn't immediately obvious to me was how important it is to be honest with the kids, even if it's something that's difficult to talk about, even if you don't have all the answers. It's really fascinating. I interviewed somebody, her name is Lauren Schneider, and she runs a grief program in Los Angeles. And she talked about this, that because a lot of times, especially in a cause of death like a suicide or something that nobody wants to talk about. I mean, nobody wants to talk about death at all. And then really nobody wants to talk about suicide and other, some so-called stigmatized causes of death. A lot of times parents are tempted to have a cover story for their kids. Oh, they're too young. I'll tell them it was a heart attack or something like that, right? And I'm sorry, Alexa's speaking in the background. I hope you
Hi, Alexa.
I'm not sure what Alexa, stop. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
that they're tempted to come up with a story that seems easier, and they think, well, someday I will tell them the truth, right? Well, it sets up this really difficult situation that when I interviewed Lauren, she explained how critical it is for kids to be able to trust their surviving parent. And that not only, for their sake right now and their youth and growing up, but also it actually sets the pattern for their long-term future adult intimate relationships, whether they're close friends, whether they're partners, whether they're work colleagues they have to work closely with, those kinds of close human relationships. And so what happens is inevitably either the kid finds out, maybe they suspect something's wrong because adults always get hush hush about it and they don't know what's wrong, but they know something's wrong. Or maybe some other kid on the playground tells them because other people in the community know. Eventually they find out, then it breaks that bond of trust with the surviving parent. And so I try to apply this idea. It's like when the kids asked, is he going to die? Right? It's tempting to say, oh, no, everything's going to be okay. It's going to be great, or anything along those lines, right? And the thing is, I knew it wasn't, right? Glioblastoma has a 5-year survival rate in the single digits. And so as hard as it is to say, he's not, he is going to die. And how long is it going to be? Well, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And then it's okay to say you don't know, you'll find out, you'll help them find out, all these things. This is one of these kind of, I think of this as kind of a fundamental question, right? When I'm thinking as a parent, because parents coming into this, most of us are not experts in childhood, child development and, and all this kind of stuff, right? And all of our parenting experience up to this point is based on kind of like normal childhood parenting stuff, right? You're struggling with the kid with all these like kind of normal childhood issues, and all of a sudden you're throwing a big curveball in here of, their parent dying. So everything, the whole ballgame changes. And it wasn't, I felt the pressure of like, if they ask X, do I tell them the truth or not? Felt like a very monumental question. Right?
Well, it's a monumental question for yourself as an individual, because you also have to admit to yourself that A, you don't know, and B, inevitably, statistically, the chances are this, and you have to admit that to yourself on top of the heartbreak of your child. And so monumentally, that's a lot of people don't feel. We all want to have a rosy ending. We all want to see the world rainbows and butterflies, and sometimes there's clouds, and that's a tough one. I mean, it's so tough.
Yeah, it is. And, you want to be able to wave a magic wand to make it all better. And you want to prevent the kids from being upset, and you want to, prevent crying and things like that. And that's another thing I learned is that, if someone is upset, it's okay. It doesn't have to be stopped at all costs, right? It's like the person, whether it's a child or an adult, they feel what they're feeling. And you don't want to try to talk them out of it, right? Oh, the kid is upset because dad's dying. And then if you try to talk them out of it, like, oh, it's going to be okay, and a bunch of stuff that kind of basically ends up leaving them feeling invalidated. That I learned, from talking to all these people and from this experience, that it's better to say, yeah, this sucks. Yeah, I miss dad too. Tell me more about how you're feeling. Right? And kind of like have the discussion in a way that validates what they're feeling instead of tries to like talk them out of how they're feeling.
Well, I think that's a healthy approach to healing as well, because my daughter's going to be 16 in June, so our kids are kind of about the same age.
Yeah.
And just in the last 2 years, there's been a huge change with her maturity wise. Mm-hmm. And so your kids were at a different maturity level, at a little kid huggy, holding hands, still gives you the stinky breath morning kisses, like that love stuff. And what a gut punch. And how do you process that when you don't really, most kids don't experience death,
right?
And
maybe their dog dies, or their grandparent dies, right? And actually in our case, our first dog did die when they were quite young, although I think it was too long ago. They didn't remember too much about it. So, and, their grandparents haven't, they haven't had other people die. So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, you mentioned about ages of kids. One of the things I learned too is that kids kind of have to re-grieve as they go through different developmental milestones. So if their parent dies when they're 5 or something, they can grieve like a 5-year-old with a 5-year-old level of understanding, and they're understanding that they're going to miss, dad helping them take them to soccer or something. But then as they're, get older, they start to hit that puberty brain development phase, their level of cognitive and understanding upgrades, and now they have to re-grieve again with the understanding of a 12-year-old.
Right.
And then maybe again later, and it's a very interesting, that wasn't something that was obvious to me there. And that's a difference with adults, because an adult who has had a significant loss, presumably their cognitive, they have an adult level of cognitive skill, and so they're going to grieve with, their cognitive abilities aren't going to change in 10 years or something, whereas with kids, their cognitive abilities are upgrading, right, throughout their whole childhood, so they keep having to re-grieve those milestones. And sometimes parents tell me, my husband died when my kid was a baby, and I grieved, and my kid grieved at a 3-year-old level or something. 10 years later, the kid's 13, they're grieving again, and the parent's like, whoa, this was 10 years ago. I have, I did a bunch of work and like dealt with my grief and everything, and that was 10 years ago, and now I'm living through it again, because for my kid now, my 13-year-old who's 10 years out, it's fresh all over again, because of that new level of cognitive understanding.
And it's milestones. Like, I think a lot of kids kind of wonder and create an imagery in their head of what it could be, what it would have been, all of these pretenses of possibilities in relationship, and they're curious. Children are just naturally curious, and somehow, somewhere along the lines, as adults, we become just duds. We don't have fun anymore, right?
Or we've been socialized out of asking certain things.
Right. And I think it's even harder for kids because they're in a creative place, and they're in that could have, would have, should have. I know I was fatherless, so as a child, it was always, what does he look like? I don't have any pictures. Was he a good guy? Was he bad? Did he have an accent? Does he have a mustache? And it just was always a regular part of my being. And and I think for death, that is also very similar in that space.
Yeah. What would dad be like now? How would daily life be? What would he think about this or that? It's an interesting, gosh, there's something you said that it was on the tip of my tongue, and a thought related to this, but maybe I'll think of it. I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. Just the milestones, I think, is really what the point was. Like, you graduate high school, I wish dad was here,
Oh yeah. Well, it's the loss of the imagined future. And this actually applies to adults and kids too, right? Like, I imagined that we'd be growing old together, and maybe we'd be working for X number of years, and then we'd retire, and then maybe we'd travel, or maybe we'd do something else, or maybe you don't know exactly how it's going to unfold, and maybe our kids will have their own families, and maybe we'll be grandparents, or you kind of have all these possibilities, and where you don't know exactly where it's going to go, but you kind of have some parameters where you're imagining some things, right? And then when you lose the person, not only do you lose them here and now and that relationship and all that, you also lose that future that you imagined. And so kids also, they probably imagined that their parent is going to be, on the sidelines of their high school sports games, or in the crowd at their band concert, or at their wedding, or at their college graduation, or at, when they, like, whatever future they've imagined for themselves, that parent who's now dead was probably part of those future scenarios they've thought about. And so now they've lost. So it's kind of strange to think, like it hasn't happened yet that we could be retired and traveling. Obviously, that's not going to happen for a while. And yet, if I imagined that, I lost it, even though I lost something that never happened, which sounds a little strange. but those things that we do spend time imagining or planning or dreaming about become very real in a way of our expectations are real, right? And now those expectations have been killed by this change in situation and by the loss of this person.
So not to make you cry, you don't have to go too deep. Towards the end, I've counseled a lot of people who were going through the final stages of cancer, and in the cases that I worked with, the person was just utterly a completely mean, and between the drugs and the cancer eating away at what was left. There's this process that is really hurtful because the person that you know and love is going through this transition, but then maybe not so pleasant. and having to balance the love that you had for the person prior to the end moment. You know, what recommendations do you have, if any, on how to cope with that dichotomy? I mean, it's really hard to watch.
Yeah, and our experience was a little bit different than that. The person he was definitely different and no longer, but not because he got, you know, mean or surly or something like that, but because cognitively the brain cancer affects people differently, and in his case it affected his memory and his understanding and all these things. And so he actually was very pleasant and friendly and kind and very, very in the moment, right? But his cognitive, you know, like if somebody came to visit, I always had to say, like, hey, Dennis, so-and-so is here. You remember them from this job you had 20 years ago? You know, and because I thought he probably didn't, I didn't want to embarrass him by like, I guess, showing up who he should know, but he doesn't know because his brain's messed up, right? And things like, you know, it really limited our activities to like sitting and watching TV together, which, you know, in the final weeks and months of his illness, it was Christmas time. And so, oh my God, we had that Hallmark Christmas movie channel on, like every waking hour, the Hallmark Christmas movie, because you got to have something to fill the airtime. We had HGTV on a lot too, and Food Network. Yeah. Right. And because it's like, there was no let's sit and talk and have meaningful discussions. There was no let's play a card game or a board game as a family. There was nothing to do that he could cognitively participate in besides watching together whatever's on TV.
That must have been quite the almost jail cell for you, to sit there and just wait and wait and wait and watch the decline and balance everything. We're running out of time, unfortunately. 25 minutes is not a long time to talk about this, but I really I invite you back on if you still have the link scheduled, because I think we need a part 2 of this. It's a very important topic, and
okay, sure.
I don't even think we scratched the surface. But you know, for you yourself as a mom trying to balance the galaxy, I mean, you're balancing all of the stuff. I'm a full-time single mom, so in some respects I get it, but I was a single mom by choice, and you were a single mom by genetics, maybe.
Circumstance of some kind, yeah.
Right. And so what did you do for yourself to try to get and cope and process and take care of yourself so you didn't lose yourself in that process?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I was, you mentioned being in a jail cell. I couldn't leave the house unless I had a different adult come over to sit with him, because safety and, you know, just couldn't happen. So I was incredibly lucky to have friends and family members who would come over, even if I just went to go like on a really long walk, or I had girlfriends who would come over, you know, at like late at night after I'd get him to bed. They'd come over, and everybody had to come to my house. I couldn't go to their houses, right? And we could sit around and talk. And just having that ability to process out loud with some of them. Also, I ended up doing a lot of like middle of the night messing around with a guitar.
Nice.
Yeah, and I always say I have more enthusiasm than skill for the guitar, which was, it was totally fine. I'd practice and do stuff. And the other thing I did, which is um, ended up being really helpful, was I had a Caring Bridge journal, and it started out, where people share with people following what's happening. Started out very matter of fact. He had surgery, this happened, whatever. But as I went on, I got more and more reflective and composing kind of, essays and reflections and stuff. And so a lot of times in the course of a day, I'd be thinking about some post that I might make and kind of processing through the writing as I went along. So that ended up actually being, I didn't realize how much of an outlet that would be and how much of a helpful tool that would end up being, but it really was.
Very cathartic for sure.
Mm.
And so we are winding down, but I want everybody to be able to reach out to you if they have any questions. Do you have like a online grief forum or anything like that you have available for people?
I don't have like a group or anything right now. What I do have, so people can find my book if they go to futurewidowbook.com. There's all the places you can buy it there. And then my podcast and my website, which has a ton of resources, if you go to widowedparentpodcast.com. You can find all the episodes. There's about 100 now, and resources, including, you mentioned that you've been supporting some friends who have spouses with cancer. I have a page for allies, I call them, those people that are helping, with a bunch of suggestions, resources, a document you can download with a whole bunch of ideas. So
That's great.
That's another good. So it's jennylisk.com/allies.
You're the bomb, Mom. How are the kids doing? They're doing good?
Oh, they're great. Yeah, they're in virtual school right now. So hopefully that's going all right this morning.
Yeah, mine's learning how to drive. And so I hit the Oh My Jesus bar like 5 times this morning on the way to, he goes to college in the morning and high school in the afternoon. She's dual enrolled.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
So we were driving to college in the morning and she almost ran into the back of a school bus. I'm like, no,
oh, no.
not today.
Yeah.
Not today.
Yeah. My son just got his license a few months ago. So
how do you feel about that? That's,
you know what? It's great. It's having another driver in the house is really helpful. He'll go to the grocery store. You know what? He's pretty careful. So cool. It's great. And I tell you, when he says, "Can I go to the store?" that makes it all worth it,
Yeah. I feel like I have to bubble wrap her. I'm one of those moms that when she finally does leave the nest, I'm probably going to be a hot mess for at least a year. So mushy. Anyway, Jenny, thank you for all that you do for everyone. And I hope this story reaches out and hits home for those people who need the extra arm, hug, virtual love, and assistance. And feel free to book another slot so that we can get into kind of your role at the end and how you were able to just be like, okay, I have to pull up my big girl panties and get it done. And
yeah, absolutely. I will do that. And thank you, Rusty. It's been great speaking with you this morning.
Nice talking to you. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
You're watching Living and Thriving with Rusty, and I'm Rusty, and I get to do this. I get to travel all over the world, meeting amazing people, doing amazing things. And my heart for her. But look at what she turned it into. Magic, pure magic. She's able to help you, your kids, your family, and all versions of you, because in the grief process, you are many people trying to learn how to be a new person and a new version of yourself. So check her out, links below. Know that I love you. Know that you're beautiful. Do something kind. I can't stress this enough. This world needs more kind people. And strangely enough, if you were to think about it, doing something kind for somebody else might change their trajectory. Look it up. It's a big word, but kind of means the way that they're going, because maybe they're going in a bad way, and your kindness, your hug, your smile, your kind word, free cup of coffee, whatever it is that you want to do that's simple and gentle, could actually cheer somebody up. Think about it. It's important. Until next time.